Chai with Manjula, a show about giving, featuring non-profit organizations, social activists, social entrepreneurs, and philanthropists who are giving back and making a difference.
Chai with Manjula is a show that is a must-see.
Today, a story about giving beyond boundaries. Welcome to Chai with Manjula. To Hindus, the river Ganges or Ganga has special significance for religious rites and as a holy sanctuary. Through its 1,500-mile stretch from the Himalayan mountains to the Bay of Bengal, the river also provides drinking water, bathing water, and crop irrigation. In Benaras, also called Varanasi or Kashi, Ganga is revered as mother or goddess who nourishes the very soul of the sacred city. Every day, more than 60,000 people, including tourists, bathe and pray in the river here in Varanasi, and they also sip the water as an act of religious purification. However, the level of pollution in the river is truly alarming, with major health consequences to countless people. My guest today is Catherine Porter, who is a volunteer executive director of the Friends of the Ganges organization. And she has been devoted to cleaning up the Ganges over the past 23 years. She is also on the board of directors of the Global Green Grants Fund and the Jennifer Altman Foundation, and is director at Collaboration Impact. Catherine, welcome to Chai with Manjula.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, yours is a fascinating story. You belong to the U.S., you live here in the Bay Area, and you're so passionately involved with cleaning up Ganga, a river which is halfway around the world in India. What drew you to Ganga? Did you have any prior ties with India?
You know, I didn't. I had no ties. It was 1988. A friend of mine who'd been working there said, Catherine, we work well together and I need some help on the Ganges project. Would you come? I said, no, I'm interested in some work in Africa right now. And some timing thing happened and I had some support from family and friends. I said, go ahead. So I went to India in 1988 thinking, what have I got to lose? But I'll tell you, the Ganges wasn't the thing that was exciting to me. And when I got there, we landed in Varanasi, and this dear friend, Fran Peavy, was with me. We're in a Jeep tooling through the outskirts of Benaras from the airport. And there, my first time to India, I'm assaulted, right, by that which assaults us in India. The incredible beauty, the colors, the smells, and the terrifying realities for Westerners of cows and traffic and goats and dogs and kids and just the noise and the smells. I went, oh my goodness. And Fran says, oh, it feels like we're home. And I thought, oh my goodness, I am here for a month in India with a crazy woman. What will I do now? And I really had some anxiety. So we pull up to Tulsi Ghat and they take me to my room. And I open these French doors that look right down on the Ganges. And suddenly I'm transported. I see these beautiful women in saris. I hear the bells clanging. I see children and men and people doing their devotions. And I just was hooked. It was like Mother Ganga tapped me on the shoulder and said, you're working for me now. And I said, okay, I'm here. And 22 years later, I'm still going, but it was a surprise to me, too.
Wow, that's very interesting. So once you got there, what were your findings? How polluted is the Ganges, and what are some of the major pollutants?
Well, I wish I could tell you that in the years that I've been working on it, and the years that our Indian colleagues have been working on it, which is 30 years, I came in later into the project, that the river is cleaner. It is not. It is not. The major pollutants are some industrial tannins, dyes, but mostly it's untreated sewage. The World Health Organization sets parameters for clean water around the world, and their parameters for drinking water are 0 parts of fecal coliform, the waste in sewage, per 100 milliliters, 0. I think in India it might be a little higher, maybe 50 or 100. And the parameters for bathing are 500 at the highest. Again, a little higher in India. I think they set them at about 2,500. what we found when we finally got a water testing laboratory, thanks to the Swedish government in 1992, was that the water counts not 0, not 250, not 2,500. They're regularly 1 million or 2 million parts per 100 milliliters pretty much every day.
My God,
The
that is
water is
shocking.
filthy. It is shocking. It is shocking. So it's not hard to know that something must be done.
So what are the hazards of
Well,
polluted
the
water?
hazards are, as in any place with polluted water, I think the major diseases that we can track with some reasonable measure of assertion that's true, meaning there's not a lot of great public health data. But Dr. Steve Hamner from Montana State University in 2004 did some original data collecting and shows that cholera, typhoid, but mostly the dysentery, the diarrheal diseases that affect particularly children and older people, but people of all ages. When the water's that dirty, if you've got any vulnerability to disease, you can imagine that you might get sick. It's a real sadness.
I see. So describe to us, what do you see there when you are in Benaras on the shores of Ganga in terms of pollution? What all is going on there?
Well, it's a little confounding because what you actually see from a distance or at sunrise when it's so beautiful and all the boats come down to see the sun rise on Ganga is a beautiful, slow-moving river. Slower at some parts of the year than others. During the monsoons, it's moving pretty quickly. But you see this beautiful river, and when you get up close, you see that there are methane bubbles coming up from the pollution. There are plastic bags that people have thrown in, all manner of trash and garbage. Mollusks should probably not be thrown in, but they're biological, and the river can handle that. So visually, there's a contrast of how beautiful it is at a distance, and up close, how clearly it needs help.
I see. And it's a very deep-rooted tradition with Hindus to immerse ashes of the dead into Ganga. And Hindus all over the world, living in the US or other countries, also follow that tradition. They immerse the ashes in the Ganga. So how safe is that? Is that one of the pollutants?
That's a great question. You know, many Americans who haven't been to India believe that it's all these dead bodies going into the river that cause the pollution. But as you know, the bodies are cremated and it's the ashes that go in. And ashes are just carbon. The river can actually handle that.
Really?
So the immersion of ashes is not a problem. In fact, for me, I have some very precious moments. 2 dear friends and my father's ashes have been immersed in the Ganges under a beautiful
Really?
ritual. In fact, yes, my father in 2005 and Fran Peavy, who started the Friends of the Ganges project, passed away just this year. And we had the most beautiful ceremony of the immersion of her ashes with people from all over the world come to celebrate. It felt so sacred and so appropriate because of her devotion to Ganga. So we would never do anything that would harm Ganga. In fact, this felt like a blessing.
Wow, so this is not just a project to you. You actually feel a spiritual connection with Ganga.
Yeah, it's hard to look at that river and not. Now, I have friends in the United States who care about rivers here in much the same way. We don't call the Colorado River a goddess, but people are devoted to rivers all over the world. Ganga, I think, however, has got something particularly special, and it certainly is for me.
And another tradition is to bathe in Ganga. Each day, thousands and thousands of, tens of thousands of people bathe. Now, what do you have to say about that? Would you bathe in Ganga?
You know, well, 65,000 people pretty much every day bathe in Ganga, and a lot more
in
on
Benaras
ritual
alone.
bathing days. In Benaras alone, yes.
Right.
And during the Kumbh Mela or places, you know, there are millions of people bathing on sacred bathing days. There's no indication that they get particularly sick. On sacred bathing days, in fact, the government will hold back in the ways that they can sewage from the river. But I would say to people, you need to use your own best judgment. Most of the Friends of the Ganges that come love the river, but don't bathe in her. I actually do a holy dip once every year.
You do?
But you know, it's sunrise, it's dark, I sneak back up to my room and I take a long hot bath with antibacterial soap. And I think we can be clear that most people that bathe in Ganga every day don't have that opportunity. Right? They don't have that opportunity for cleanliness. So
for tourists, it's a good suggestion.
For
That
tourists, I would
after
say
the
you have to
difference
follow
to
your
Ganga-
own heart. Follow your own heart. If it feels right to you, I wouldn't say it's the wisest of public health advisories to dip in water that is that polluted. But people will and do and insist they feel so great afterwards.
But
I'm
you-
afraid to make any recommendation.
But you can always take an antibacterial bath like you do.
Right, right.
So that's a
And I
good
don't drink the
suggestion.
water, and I wouldn't suggest that
Okay.
anybody do.
So where is it safe to bathe in Ganga? Are there any parts of Ganga that are cleaner than the others?
Yes, there are. Way up in the headwaters, I think you can count on the water being quite a bit cleaner. The last couple of years, I've been privileged to do a whitewater raft trip up above Rishikesh.
Oh.
And we have all felt that it was plenty clean enough to
So
swim
it's
in.
cleaner to it's the source.
Right, right,
yeah,
right.
that
It
makes
picks up
sense.
pollution from every
As it
city
goes
along the
along.
way, and those are the things you need to worry about.
Okay, that's good to know that there are still some parts that are clean.
Oh, yeah, there are. Yeah. And she's sparkling and beautiful, and needs their attention there too, but sparkling and beautiful.
What about the Ganga Jal? Even that is questionable.
Well,
Has
we
that
all
been
take
tested?
Ganga gel and we hold it in the sun and it's been purified, and I have friends, we use it here all the time for purification rituals and the things we enjoy. So I think Ganga gel coming home is probably fine.
Okay, so that puts our mind at ease. Okay.
Yeah. But I think
All
there's
right.
some wisdom in keeping clean water in mind. In fact, one of the diseases that we tracked was in the villages outside of Benaras, where children were being exposed to the polluted water through their groundwater and through the water near them. And they had terrible skin diseases. Year after year, we would send in doctors to treat these children, topical treatments for this. And finally, one doctor wisely, this beautiful Dr. Vipul Mishra, wisely said, you know, topical medicines will never cure these children. Only clean water will solve this problem. Well, of course he's right. Of course
Okay,
he's
so
right.
ongoing contact with the water is
Yeah.
causing skin diseases
Right,
and
right.
stomach-related
Right,
problems,
right.
which is understandable.
Right. Back to the mantra, the water must be clean. Ganga must be clean.
Right.
Of course.
So now, Catherine, tell us about the Sankat Mochan Foundation that Friends of the Ganges is supporting. What is it about? What are some of its initiatives?
Well, the Sankat Mochan Foundation was started way back, I think, in 1982, after a number of mostly Americans had come through Varanasi and said to this wonderful man, Dr. Veerbhadra Mishra, whom we all know as Mahantji, Mahantji, it's a shame this river is so filthy. You live right on the banks of Ganga, and she really is filthy. And he said, what can I do? And they said, we are cleaning rivers in the United States. We have our own polluted rivers. We have some successes. Why don't you come to the United States and learn what we have to teach? So Mahantji came with a small grant from the Tides Foundation in the Bay Area and spent time in the Bay Area, and then went to the Hudson River in New York and worked on that cleanup with Pete Seeger, the folk singer.
Oh.
They became dear friends, and Pete has been back to Benaras several times to visit. So then when Mahantji got back, he said, I will take on this work if you all will help me. I'll need some support. But they started the Sankat Mochan Foundation, named after the Sankat Mochan Temple, which is the temple nearby, of
I
which
see.
Mahantji is the Mahant. And I'll say more about that in a moment, perhaps. But the foundation was established to clean Ganga, to educate people about Ganga, and to forward the works of Tulsi Das Ji.
I
Mahantji is a Mahant in the lineage of Tulsi Das, the sainted
Wow.
poet who translated the Ramayana.
Oh, yeah.
And he lives in Tulsi Das Ji's home,
Legendary
in fact.
poet
Yes,
and
yes.
saint and
So
wow.
the site there is where Tulsi Das Ji himself wrote poetry by the banks of the Ganges,
So he
which
said-
was much cleaner in his lifetime.
So Mahantji lives there in the same
Yes.
house where Tulsi Das Ji lived?
Yes.
Wow,
yes,
that's
yes.
so inspiring.
Yes, oh, it's lovely. You must come.
Okay.
So the Sankat Mochan Foundation does those three things.
And how do they do that?
Well, the Clean Ganga part has been very wide-ranging. It was lobbying first Indira Gandhi and then Rajiv Gandhi as prime ministers to create a Ganges action plan. And Rajiv Gandhi, in his tenure, created Ganges Action Plan Phase 1. So first it was just drawing awareness to politicians. They built many sewage treatment plants along the Ganges, only for us to discover some years later, none of them was working, not one. To this day, hundreds of sewage treatment plants along the Ganges, they are not working. They're not working because there are electrical shortages. The electricity doesn't work during the days. They stop working. The sewage backs up. The pumps break. finished, and that's what happened in Benaras.
I see.
So the next phase of the work was designing some kind of system that would work. So engineering advice. In 1992, we had an international convention of engineers from all over the world to talk about what would work here to clean Ganga, and finally made a recommendation in 94.
I see.
So lobbying, education, designing new technologies that might work, and watchdog. One of the most important things the Sankat Mochen Foundation does is keep governments accountable. Central government, state government, local government, they all have responsibilities for cleaning this river. And the Sankat Mochen Foundation has been the little dog nipping at their heels for almost 30 years now. And most people would tell you they've been successful, particularly there, keeping it in the media, keeping people aware of the problems. So that's what they do.
And tell us about your involvement. How deeply involved are you with this project? How many times have you been to India?
Well, I've been going every year at least once, sometimes twice for the last 23 years now. But Friends of the Ganges goes, I go, I'm the executive director now. Our president, Fran Peavy, the one who passed away recently, had been going for 25 years. There's also a Friends of the Ganges in Sweden, Ganga Vänner. And there's a Friends of the Ganges, beloved colleagues in Australia. The Swedes have taken on much of the engineering and the work with the laboratory.
I see.
The Australians have done a lot of work with education, working with teachers and in the schools, working with young children and teaching them leadership potential, how they can speak out about problems in their communities. They are so inspiring. And so it's wide-ranging, the work we do.
Okay, and all these people are volunteers?
Everyone. The Sankat Mochen Foundation works on a tiny budget and has 3.5 to 5 staff, depending on how you count them.
That's Sankat Mochen Foundation.
Sankat Mochen Foundation.
But Friends of the Ganges is all volunteers?
Friends of the Ganges has no paid staff. Right?
That's amazing. So all these people in Sweden and Australia and in the U.S., they are just working out of their love for Ganga.
Yeah, exactly. You see this river, you meet these people who are so devoted. It's the work of the heart, but it is joyful service. In fact, I think about Hanuman. Sankat Mochen Temple is a Hanuman temple.
I see.
And Tulsi Das Ji had a vision of Hanuman at the place where that temple is. And sometimes I think, I who am not a Hindu, think Hanuman has got a finger on the pulse of this project. He's the god of joyful service in my mind. Devoted, joyful service. That's what it feels like. People do this work out of their hearts.
And tell us about Mahantji. What is his background?
He's an interesting man. Oh, a delightful soul. He is, as I said, in a 480-year lineage from Tulsi Das Ji. His father, the Mahant, died when he was 14. He became the Mahant young, and his mother and uncle took over his education. His mother felt it would be important for him to get a college education, and he became the first Mahant in India to get a PhD, to have a graduate degree. And luckily for us, he decided to take his degree in engineering and was dean of the School of Engineering at BHU, Benaras Hindu University, for some years before he retired 2 years ago.
I see.
So he's a holy man, he's an engineer, and he's an activist. He doesn't shy from having his voice be heard. Time magazine called him a hero of the planet some years ago. And the United Nations called him part of the Global 500 Heroes for the Planet back in 1992 at a United Nations conference. So he speaks out, he has the science, and he has the cultural and religious values that pull this all together for us. He's wonderful to work with.
Wow, sounds wonderful. Does he ever come here? Would love to meet him.
He does. He comes about every 4 or 5 years, meets friends and supporters throughout the Bay Area, usually stops in Chicago, Boston, New York, depending on where we move him around. Yes.
I would love to invite him to Chai with Manjula next time he's here.
Oh, that would be great. He has a very compelling voice for this work. He'd be lovely.
Okay. So now, coming back to Friends of the Ganges, so basically the work that you are doing is lobbying and giving technology, giving financial support.
Right. What the Friends of the Ganges do is ask the Sankat Mochen Foundation, what do you need this year? And we raise the small amounts of money that they need to do their work. Every year they put on World Water Day a human chain along the full length, 8 kilometers of the Ghats along Ganga. School children and people from all over the city standing out there in the hot sun, just praising Ganga and insisting that she be clean.
That's
so that
beautiful.
happens every year in March.
Uh-huh.
They do a number of music festivals. The Sankat Mochan Foundation also is a major supporter of the classical arts in India.
Oh.
And there's a 3-day music festival that takes place at the temple, which includes both classical music, the works of Tulsidas, and a message about cleaning Ganga. They're
Wow.
fabulous at making sure that everything talks about
That's a beautiful
Ganga.
blend
Yeah,
of three.
it's great. So raising money for those cultural events, some of that. Raising money for the education, raising money for lobbying,
I
and for the
see.
small staff, the laboratory update, the new materials we need, updating computers. So much is happening these days on the computer,
Right.
websites, the internet. We need to make sure our staff has what they need to do that.
So how do you raise funds for the work that Friends of the Ganges is doing, and what will it take? What kind of funds do you need to finish the work of cleaning up the Ganges in Varanasi?
Well, we wish it were short term, but the truth is we're raising money constantly every year until Ganga is clean.
I see.
Fortunately, what we raise now is just for the Sankat Mochan Foundation to do its work, and a few affiliated NGOs up and down Ganga in towns nearby. So we're looking at less than $60,000 a year. I don't know if you know what it takes to run NGOs in the United States. It's significantly more.
Right.
So each year we try to raise with the Friends of the Ganges Australia about $55,000 or $60,000.
I
And
see.
here in the United States, I write some grant proposals. We have Friends of the Ganges who are regular small contributors.
Oh,
the
they are.
smallest amount makes a difference. Well, anybody that's gone or anybody that hears Mahanchi or even sees him on television or hears him on a radio will say, this is work I want to support. So we're lucky that way.
Okay.
But we're constantly asking friends, using AAAS, the American Academy for the Advancement of Science, had a wonderful article just a few months ago, and we've used that as a fundraising mechanism as well, because it's very factually based about the needs and basically how simple it might be to clean this river if we got our act together.
Okay, so what's your vision? How long do you think it will take to clean Ganga in Benaras? And what are some of the challenges?
Oh, there's the question. Ultimately, as in almost every country, cleaning Ganga is the work of government. It's not really the work of NGOs.
True.
So the Sankat Mochan Foundation has found itself in a unique position, both watchdogging the government, but also helping design programs that will work. So 3 years ago, the Prime Minister said to the Sankat Mochan Foundation, this alternative plan that you've come up with is the one we'll choose. We want to see if it will work. We'll do a pilot project. It's called Advanced Integrated Wastewater Ponding Systems, a system that doesn't use electricity to treat wastewater.
Oh, so that's a solution.
There are many of them in the United States. There aren't any in India. So this will be the first one. The government of India has allocated the money for this to be built.
Okay.
Now, recently, 2 years ago, the World Bank has come in and said all of Ganga needs to be clean. We guess it's about a $4 billion project, and we will loan you $1 billion to get started.
That's wonderful.
So Ganga will be clean by 2020. Now, it's quite complicated. These are big targets. We've been at it a long time.
It's a 1,500-mile long river.
Exactly. Which, as you know, has 500 million people depending on it for their well-being.
Right.
So cleaning it up is imperative. Everybody knows it's the case. It's the job of government. They need the non-government organizations, NGOs, to nip at their heels and make sure they meet the commitments they make. But my vision is a clean Ganga well before 2020, meaning in Benaras before 2020. I believe it can happen. These
That's
new
great.
technologies, the work that we've done, the local government is very much a supporter of the Sankat Mochan Foundation plan. That's a blessing. State government is coming around, and the federal government is very much in favor of this. I think it can be done.
So in terms of challenges, what do you have to say? What is the biggest challenge?
Well, like all of these things, right? The big challenge is engineering, making sure that all of the pieces are in place to do a big job like this. But it's not rocket scientists, as I often say. It's not brain surgery. This is sewage treatment.
Right.
They do this all over the world. So
see.
the technology, not so big a challenge. It's mostly political.
Oh.
It's mostly making sure that people meet their commitments and that there's support, financial and political, to get this work done.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. So besides Friends of the Ganges, what are your other involvements? What other initiatives are you
I've been working on
working on?
environmental causes for decades. And right now, my professional work is working with a group of American foundations, philanthropic foundations, who are addressing freshwater issues in the United States.
I see.
So issues of stormwater contamination and agricultural runoff and groundwater, why it needs to be kept clean. So rivers in the United States, just as my volunteer work in the Ganges, kind of flow together in my life. That's what I've been doing here.
Great.
It really sings to me. I love rivers, love water. And I just love the environment. I do a lot of environmental work, but lately it's been rivers.
So you are the right person for this kind of work.
Maybe. I hope so. It sure feels like it to me.
Ganga is in good hands.
Yeah, at the very least, this is the right work for this person.
Okay. And how can people help and how can they reach you?
Great question. People can help in so many ways. It seems to me that people that go to visit Ganga know instantly what needs to be done. But even people that don't visit Ganga often know, just in their hearts, this is a place that needs our help. So I would say the things that can be done are spreading the word. What is it that I could do to tell people that I might know in a place of influence or others that would care about Ganga? Certainly making financial contributions from small to large. They can reach me at Friends of the Ganges. I have an email address and would happily personally answer any inquiry. In fact, my email address is cjporter at igc.org.
What is your message for our viewers?
Oh my goodness.
What would you like
The
to
message isn't hard. It seems to me the message is this is an incredibly beautiful, and if you believe that, sacred river. She's really sick. She needs our help. She deserves to be clean. All rivers deserve to be clean. But the people who devote so much attention and religious ritual to this beautiful body of water should have it be clean for them. And my message is that of the Sankat Mochan Foundation. Not a single drop of sewage along the sacred bathing ghats in Benaras. That's it. That's simply.
On that beautiful note, Catherine, I thank you so much for coming by and making time for this. And I admire your dedication and passion. It's really commendable, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about Ganga. What a pleasure.
That's all we have for you today. Our guest was Catherine Porter, Executive Director of Friends of the Ganges, an organization formed by a group of dedicated volunteers from Australia, Sweden, and the US. They have been providing crucial support to clean up the holy Ganges River in the sacred city of Benaras in India by lobbying, by providing technology, alternative solutions, and financial support. All because they care. An inspiring story of selfless giving and people reaching beyond borders. For more information, visit their website, friendsofganges.org, and you may watch this show again at chaivithmanjula.org. Thank you all for joining us. I'll be back with another inspiring story about giving and people making a difference. For Chai with Manjula, I'm Manjula Gupta. See you next time.